Daniel Cross knew something was wrong the moment his phone buzzed. It was 8:47 in the morning. He was eating toast in the break room, same as every Tuesday. But the message on his screen made his hands go cold. Executive floor. Now, Margaret wants you. In 7 years at Hale Dynamics, Daniel had never been called to the top floor. Never. He worked in the basement, fixing problems nobody else wanted to touch. Broken machines, lost files, angry customers. He was the invisible man who made things work again. And invisible men don't get called upstairs. Daniel threw his toast in the trash. His stomach felt like it was tied in knots. He took the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. 3, 7, 12, 15. The doors opened to a world of glass and marble and silence. A woman in a sharp suit stood waiting. "Follow me," she said. Her voice was ice. They walked down a hallway, so white it hurt Daniel's eyes. Every door they passed was closed. Every office was quiet. It felt like walking through a hospital where everyone had already died. Then they reached the boardroom. The door was made of dark wood, thick and heavy. The woman knocked twice, then pushed it open. "He's here," she said. Daniel stepped inside. 12 people sat around a table made of black stone. They all wore expensive clothes. They all stared at him like he was a bug that had crawled onto their dinner plate. At the head of the table sat Margaret Hale. She was 60 years old, with silver hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. Her eyes were gray and sharp, like broken glass. She owned Hale Dynamics. She owned the building. She owned the chairs everyone sat in. And right now, she looked at Daniel like she wanted to own his destruction too. "Sit," Margaret said. She didn't point. She didn't need to. Daniel sat in the only empty chair. It was at the far end of the table, away from everyone else, away from safety. Margaret picked up a piece of paper. She held it between 2 fingers like it was something dirty. "Do you know what this is, Mr. Cross?" Daniel's mouth was dry. "No, ma'am. This," Margaret said slowly, "is a report from last Friday night. At 11:42 p.m., our entire production system collapsed. 600 machines stopped working. $2 million in contracts were destroyed. Our clients are furious." She slid the paper across the table. It skidded to a stop in front of Daniel. He picked it up with shaking hands. There were graphs, numbers, red marks everywhere. And at the bottom, highlighted in yellow, was a username. Cross _override. His name, his access code. "That's your login," Margaret said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "You were the last person in the system before everything crashed. You had access to the master controls. You had the override key." Daniel felt the room spin. I wasn't even there Friday night. I was home. I can prove." "Prove what?" Margaret leaned forward. "That you gave your password to someone else? That you let another person use your credentials? That's called security abuse, Mr. Cross. That's a crime. I didn't give my password to anyone." Daniel's voice cracked. He hated how scared he sounded. 6 months ago, I sent a report. I warned you the system was broken. I said we needed better security. I said shared access was dangerous. Nobody listened. One of the men at the table shifted in his seat. He was young, maybe 30, with slick back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His name was Trevor Lang, and Daniel had seen him around. Executive assistant, Margaret's favorite. "We have no record of that report," Trevor said smoothly. Daniel's heart dropped. "What?" "I sent it. I have emails. You have nothing," Margaret interrupted. Her voice was final, like a judge reading a sentence. "What you have is a pattern of carelessness. What you have is a disaster with your name on it. And what you have, Mr. Cross, is 10 minutes to clean out your desk." The room went silent. Daniel stared at her. "You're firing me?" "Effective immediately." Margaret stood up. Everyone else stood with her, like puppets on strings. "Security will escort you out. Your final paycheck will be mailed. Do not contact anyone from this company. Do not step foot on this property again. If you do, we will call the police." Daniel wanted to scream. He wanted to flip the table. He wanted to grab that report and shove it in their faces until they admitted they were wrong. But he didn't, because 7 years had taught him one thing. Invisible men who fight back don't stay invisible. They disappear completely. 2 security guards appeared at the door, big men with blank faces and hands the size of bricks. "Let's go," one of them said. Daniel stood. His legs felt like water. He walked past the 12 people at the table, past Margaret Hale with her ice-chip eyes, past Trevor Lang with his snake smile. Nobody said goodbye. The guards walked him to the elevator, down 15 floors, through the lobby where everyone stared, out the front doors into sunlight, so bright it felt like a slap. One of the guards handed him a white envelope. "Termination letter," he said. "Don't come back." Then they went inside and locked the doors behind them. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, holding the envelope. People rushed past him on their way to work, to meetings, to lives that still made sense. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How's work, baby?" Daniel looked up at the glass tower of Hale Dynamics. Somewhere up there, Margaret Hale was probably already forgetting his name. He put the envelope in his pocket and started walking. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. The first day after being fired, Daniel didn't leave his apartment. He sat on his couch in the dark, staring at the wall. The termination letter lay on the coffee table like a poisonous snake. He couldn't stop reading it. Gross negligence, security violation, immediate termination. Those words burned into his brain. They felt heavier than any machine he'd ever fixed. His phone rang 17 times. His mother, his sister, 2 friends from college. He didn't answer. What could he say? That he'd been thrown away like garbage? That 7 years of loyalty meant nothing? On the second day, Daniel finally opened his laptop. He went through every email he'd ever sent, every report, every warning. And there it was, 6 months ago, dated March 15th. His security report about the system's weaknesses. He'd sent it directly to Margaret Hale's office email. Daniel printed it, held it in his hands. Proof. But proof didn't matter when nobody wanted to listen. On the third day, something changed. Daniel was making coffee when his old co-worker, Marcus, sent him a text. "Dude, auditors just showed up at the office. Federal ones. It's chaos." Daniel's hand froze on the coffee pot. "What?" he whispered to his empty kitchen. "Another text. They're not here for you. They're investigating the company." Daniel's heart started pounding. He texted back. "What are they looking for?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Everything. At Hale Dynamics, the executive floor had turned into a battlefield. 2 auditors from the Federal Trade Commission sat in the boardroom where Daniel had been destroyed 3 days earlier. They wore gray suits and carried thick folders. They didn't smile. "We need all system access logs from September present," the first auditor said. Her name was Linda Chun, and she had eyes that missed nothing. Every login, every override, every admin credential used. Margaret Hale sat across from her, perfectly still, but her hands were clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. "May I ask what this is about?" Margaret's voice was smooth as silk, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded like fear. "Your company filed for emergency regulatory exemptions last month," the second auditor said. His name was James Porter, and he looked tired, like he'd seen too many lies. "Those exemptions require proof of system security. We're here to verify your claims." Margaret's assistant, Trevor Lang, cleared his throat. "We've had no security breaches. Our systems are—" "Your systems crashed 6 days ago," Linda interrupted. She opened her folder and pulled out a document. $2 million in damages. 600 machines offline. And according to this termination letter, she held it up, and Daniel's name was visible on the page. "You blamed an employee named Daniel Cross." The room went silent. "That matter has been handled," Margaret said carefully. "Has it?" James leaned forward. "Because we pulled the actual server logs. The real ones, not the summary report you showed Mr. Cross. And we found something interesting. He opened his laptop and turned it around. On the screen was a list of logins, times, dates, usernames, and there, highlighted in red, was the truth. Friday, September 20th, 11:42 p.m. Username, Clang_exec. Override key activated. Cross_override. Access level, full admin. Trevor Lang's face went pale. Mr. Lang, Linda said quietly, you use an executive access code to activate Daniel Cross's override key. You logged into the production system with his credentials. And when the system crashed, you let him take the blame. Trevor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was trying to fix a problem. The system was acting up. You thought wrong, James said. And worse, you covered it up. Margaret turned to look at Trevor. Her expression didn't change, but something cold and terrible moved behind her eyes. How long have you known? Linda asked Margaret directly. I didn't. Don't lie to us. James pulled out another paper. This is a security report Daniel Cross sent you 6 months ago, March 15th. He warned you that shared access credentials were dangerous. He warned you that anyone with executive privileges could hijack another employee's login. He told you exactly what would happen. Margaret stared at the report. Her silver hair seemed to have lost its shine. You ignored his warning, Linda continued. And when a prediction came true, you didn't investigate. You didn't check the logs. You fired him in less than 15 minutes. I made a decision based on the information I had, Margaret said stiffly. You made a decision based on emotion, James corrected. And now a man's career is destroyed because you were too proud to admit your system had problems. The door opened. More people filed in. Members of the board, lawyers, executives who usually never came to these meetings. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia Reeves, sat down heavily. Is this true? She asked Margaret. Did you fire Daniel Cross without a proper investigation? Margaret didn't answer. Did you ignore a security report? Patricia pressed. Still nothing. Margaret, Patricia said, and her voice was sharp now. Did you ruin an innocent man's reputation to cover up a system failure? Margaret Hale finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. I did what I thought was right. You did what was fast, Linda said. Not what was right. The meeting lasted 4 more hours. Trevor Lang was suspended immediately, pending criminal investigation. The board launched an internal review of Margaret's decision-making. And by the end of the day, Margaret Hale was asked to step down as CEO. It wasn't announced as a firing. It was called mutual agreement and stepping aside for the good of the company. But everyone knew the truth. She had fallen. 2 days later, Daniel's phone rang. It was Patricia Reeves from the board. Mr. Cross, she said, we owe you an apology, a formal one, and we'd like to offer you your job back. Full reinstatement, back pay, promotion to senior systems analyst, whatever you need to make this right. Daniel sat on his couch. Phone pressed his ear. He thought about the boardroom, the stairs, the way Margaret had looked at him like he was nothing. He thought about walking through that lobby again, past people who had watched him get dragged out. Mr. Cross? Patricia said, Are you there? I'm here, Daniel said quietly. Will you come back? Daniel closed his eyes. He thought about his 7 years of being invisible, of fixing problems and taking blame, of warnings that nobody heard until it was too late. No, he said. There was silence on the other end. No? Patricia repeated. You're offering me my job back because you got caught, Daniel said. Not because you believed me. Not because you trusted me. I can't work in a place that needed proof I was innocent instead of proof I was guilty. I understand, Patricia said softly. For what it's worth, Mr. Cross, I am sorry. Thank you, Daniel said. But sorry doesn't fix what's broken. He hung up, and for the first time in 5 days, Daniel smiled. 3 weeks after Daniel refused to go back to Hale Dynamics, an envelope arrived at his apartment. It was thick, official. The return address said Hale Dynamics Legal Department. Daniel's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a letter on expensive paper, the kind that felt heavy and important. Dear Mr. Cross, after a thorough investigation, we have determined that you were wrongfully terminated. All accusations against you have been officially withdrawn. Your employment record has been corrected to show resignation in good standing. We deeply regret this error. Sincerely, the Board of Directors. Daniel read it 3 times. Error, he whispered. They called it an error. Like they'd spelled his name wrong. Like they'd sent him to the wrong meeting. Not like they'd destroyed his reputation. Not like they'd made him feel worthless. Not like they'd thrown him out like trash in front of everyone. An error. Daniel put the letter on his kitchen table. He stared at it for a long time. His name was cleared on paper. The lie was gone from his official record. But the wound? That was still there, deep and aching. He picked up his phone and started looking for jobs. The first company he applied and never called back. The second one scheduled an interview, then canceled the day before. The third one brought him in, smiled politely, and said they'd be in touch. They never were. Daniel knew what was happening. Word traveled fast in the industry. People heard fire from Hale Dynamics before they heard wrongfully accused. They saw the smoke and assumed there was fire. Doors opened, but they didn't invite him in. One night, Daniel sat in his apartment with all the lights off. His sister called. "How's the job search?" she asked. "It's fine," Daniel lied. "Danny," she said gently, "I can hear it in your voice. It's not fine." Daniel's throat tightened. "They cleared my name, but nobody cares. Everyone still thinks I'm the guy who crashed the system. Imtira cease. I'm so tired." "Then rest," she said. "But don't disappear. Don't let them win." After he hung up, Daniel sat in the dark for a long time. Then he opened his laptop and kept applying. 2 months after the letter arrived, something finally changed. A small tech company called Sterling Solutions reached out. They weren't big or fancy. They fixed problems for hospitals and schools. They had 12 employees and an office above a coffee shop. The owner, a man named Robert Park, called Daniel personally. "I saw what happened at Hale Dynamics," Robert said. "I read the news, the auditor's report, everything." Daniel's stomach dropped. "I understand if you don't want to." "I want to hear your side," Robert interrupted. "In person. Tomorrow at 2. Can you make it?" Daniel almost dropped the phone. Yes, I'll be there." The next day, Daniel put on his best suit. He printed out his security report from 6 months ago. He printed out the auditor's findings. He printed out the letter clearing his name. He walked into Sterling Solutions with his shoulders back and his head high. Robert Park was 50 years old with kind eyes and gray streaks in his hair. He shook Daniel's hand firmly. "Tell me what happened," Robert said. "All of it." So Daniel did. He talked about the 7 years of being invisible, about fixing everyone's problems, about the warnings nobody heard, about Margaret Hale's cold eyes, about Trevor Lang's lies, about being dragged out by security. And then he pulled out a piece of paper. It was a diagram. Daniel had drawn it himself. It showed exactly how the security system at Hale Dynamics was broken, where the weak points were, how someone with executive access could hijack another person's login. "This is what I tried to tell them," Daniel said quietly, 6 months before everything crashed. They didn't listen. Robert studied the diagram carefully. He asked questions. Good questions. Technical questions. The kind that showed he actually understood. Finally, Robert looked up. "You were right," he said simply. "They were wrong, and they punished you for their mistake." Daniel nodded. His throat felt tight. "I want to hire you," Robert said. "Not because I feel sorry for you, but because you're exactly the kind of person who sees problems before they explode. That's rare. That's valuable." Daniel's eyes burned. He blinked hard. "Thank you. Start Monday?" Robert asked. "I'll be here," Daniel said. They shook hands again. And when Daniel walked out of that office, the sun seemed brighter than it had in months. 6 months later, Daniel was sitting at his new desk when his phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Former Hale Dynamics CEO Margaret Hale announces retirement. Daniel clicked on the article. There was a picture of Margaret, older now, more tired. The article talked about her long and successful career and her contributions to the industry. It didn't mention Daniel Cross. It didn't mention the crash. It didn't mention the lies. Daniel stared at the article for a moment. Then he closed it and went back to work. Because he learned something important. Victory doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the absence of lies. Sometimes it's waking up and knowing the truth is on record, even if the world isn't shouting about it. Margaret Hale had a glass tower with her name on it. But Daniel had something better. He had his integrity back. That night, Daniel walked past the Hale Dynamics building on his way home. The glass tower still stood, reflecting the sunset in shades of gold and red. He stopped for a moment and looked at his reflection in the glass. 7 years ago, that reflection had been invisible. 3 months ago, it had been stained with lies. But tonight, Daniel Cross saw himself clearly. A man who had refused to disappear. A man who had spoken the truth even when nobody wanted to hear it. A man who had walked through fire and come out stronger. The glass tower was still there, but the stain was gone. Daniel smiled, put his hands in his pockets, and kept walking. He had somewhere to be, a job that valued him, a team that listened, a future that was his own. And in the end, that was the truest victory of all. What did you think of Daniel's story? Sometimes the people who hurt us never face the cameras, but that doesn't mean justice didn't happen. Sometimes victory is quiet, personal, and powerful. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? How did you fight back? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Stories about people who refuse to give up. Stories about truth that waits in the darkness until it's finally seen. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's been knocked down. Someone who thinks their voice doesn't matter. Because Daniel's story proves something important. You don't need a crowd cheering to win. You just need to refuse to disappear. See you in the next story. Stay strong. Stay true. And never, ever let them erase you. Like, share, subscribe.